Chapter 3. The Doll Draws Blood. Night City was still half asleep when Akiko woke. The club's lights had died hours ago, but the smell of smoke and perfume hung in the air like ghosts reluctant to leave. Candy was still snoring softly beside her, one arm flung over the sheets, red hair a spilled halo against the pillow. The window was cracked open just enough to let the sound of rain sneak in, a rhythm that matched Akiko's breathing. She lay still for a long time, watching the faint flicker of neon move across Candy's back. The world outside looked unreal through the haze. Sometimes she imagined the entire city was a projection, a place that existed only because someone kept paying the power bill. When she finally rose, she left without waking her. The walk to her capsule was short and wet, the kind of rain that never really stopped, just changed texture. In the elevator, her reflection looked like someone else. Sleek hair, controlled expression, the faintest hint of glitter from last night's performance still clinging to her neck. Yumiko again, already resetting. The club's manager had passed her a name and an address on a chipped shard of hollow glass. A client who paid well and didn't make trouble. Easy money. That phrase was always a lie, but she needed the cash. Most of her savings had already gone into the new hardware. A pair of wrist-mounted mono-whips buried under her forearms, the kind of military tech you only saw on combat models or corporate bodyguards. She would later call them slice and dice, half joke, half warning. Not swords, never swords. Blades reminded her too much of Kendachi, of the academy, of lessons barked like orders. The whips were cleaner, faster, hers alone. Self-defense, she told herself. And if the day came when Candy ever needed protecting, she'd be ready. The apartment was somewhere in Charter Hill. Clean, expensive, the kind of place that smelled of filtered air. He greeted her in a voice that was too smooth, offered a drink that tasted like nothing. Conversation was the usual game. Small talk, feigned curiosity, a hint of corporate brag. Akiko played along, nodding every tell in his eyes, every flicker of insecurity he tried to hide. When he reached to touch her arm without asking, she moved just enough to make it look like coincidence. When he tried again, she smiled. Control the room, control yourself. The rules from the Kendachi days still applied. But then he said it, one sentence, casual, ugly. He called her property. It was the same tone her father had used when discussing quarterly projections. Something inside her froze and then split. He moved closer, confident now, sure she was his to take. The air seemed to thicken, time slowed to the space between heartbeats. Her hand flexed at her wrist, a practiced twitch of fingers that triggered the hidden implant. The monowhip unfolded with a faint shimmer, invisible line vibrating at the edge of hearing. A whisper more than a sound, a hum felt deep in the bones. A single movement, reflex, precision, and grace. The line of light cut through the air, then silence. The first red smile she had ever given bloomed across his throat. He dropped, eyes wide. The body folded before it hit the floor. The smell of ozone replaced perfume. For a long moment, she didn't move. She had killed the man. The room buzzed with the echo of that hum, a thin, metallic shriek like feedback from a broken speaker. Then she smiled, not out of cruelty, but recognition. For the first time since she'd run from the towers, she felt completely in control. That smile never left. She cleaned the scene with the same discipline she'd once used to polish a blade. Gloves, wipes, steady breath. The noise of the city outside kept perfect time. When she was done, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the streak of light the whip had burned into the wall. It looked like handwriting, her new signature. Later, back in her capsule, she replayed the memory in her head. That hum before the silence. That sound was her name now. Feedback. She met Twinkle 2 stars the next evening. He was leaning against the bar at the club like he'd been carved there, a grin that almost hid the calculation in his eyes. He was huge, shoulders like armor, laughter like low thunder. When she approached, he didn't leer or flinch. He just looked her over once, then said, "You handled yourself cleanly last night." Akiko froze. "You were watching." "Watching's part of my job," he said, setting a half-empty glass aside. "In recruiting, I don't judge the reasons, I judge the results." He slid a data chip across the counter. "You've got precision, discipline, and something to prove." If you're going to keep doing what you did, you might as well get paid for it. Akiko stared at the chip, then at him. And what are you offering? He smiled, wide and easy. Work, direction, a place where control's worth more than obedience. She took the chip without another word. Twinkle laughed, soft and knowing. Name. Feedback, she said. He nodded. Figures. That night, she sat in the dressing room with Candy, pretending the world hadn't changed. Candy was chattering about a new song, something bright and defiant. Akiko watched her hands move as she spoke, animated, alive. She wanted to reach out to tell her everything, to ask for something she couldn't name. But she didn't. She just smiled, the same smile that had followed her from that room. Candy caught it and tilted her head. You okay, Aki? Yeah, Akiko said softly. Just listening to the music. A week later, Twinkle handed her a job. Simple one, he said. Corpo slimeball who preys on his own staff. Nothing public, just correction. Akiko nodded. It sounded almost righteous, which was rare coming from a man like him. But the target's penthouse had tighter grid locks than she could crack. Cameras, biometric gates. Too much tech for a girl who preferred things she could cut. She spent 2 nights tracing chatter through kabuki bars and backroom feeds, listening instead of speaking. Eventually, a name floated up in a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear, Neo Cloud. A net ghost who hated corporations almost as much as he loved bad noodles. She burned the last of her credit to trace a signal and sent a single message. Need access. Discretion paid extra. The reply came hours later. Static first, then a face on her hollow screen, round, unshaven, surrounded by the glow of too many monitors. You really need better encryption, princess, he said, mouth full of noodles. I could see your trail from orbit. Akiko's hand twitched toward the whip control before she realized he wasn't physically there. Who are you? Someone who doesn't like corpos, he said, and someone who noticed you don't either. He dropped a data packet into her inbox. Trace scrubbers, spoof keys, a line of code labeled gift. Why help me? She asked. He grinned, grease on his fingers. Because I like watching people break their chains. Besides, you're interesting. You cut people. I cut data. We both make suits bleed. The connection flickered out, leaving only his tag behind. A pixelated cloud drifting through digital rain. She looked at the frozen image a moment longer, then exhaled. Princess. She'd let that one slide, once. Later that night, Akiko walked home alone through Kabuki. Neon puddles rippled under her boots. The hum of the city matched the hum she carried inside. She thought of Candy's laughter, of Twinkle's easy grin, of Neo's ghost in the machine. All of them orbiting the same gravity she'd become. She wasn't a doll anymore. She wasn't a product of Kendachi or anyone else. She was becoming a weapon tuned to her own rhythm. And somewhere beneath the static of the city, she swore she could still hear that first sound, the razor-thin note of a whip cutting air, the feedback of freedom.